Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Abe Braha, the founder of Icebreaker Business Development. Abe's career is a fascinating journey rooted in the sales grind, having worked his way up through various SDR roles and full cycle sales roles, from international patent coordination to software, before recognizing a critical gap in the market. Now, as a fractional VP of sales, Abe helps ambitious B2B service and software companies build robust, systematized sales processes from the ground up, ensuring they stop wasting capital and start generating predictable revenue. His insights into the sales process, calculated risk, and leveraging AI for efficiency will provide actionable wisdom for any founder looking to scale their revenue. Abe, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Wow, what an intro. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I'm just telling the audience about you. It's always nice to hear good things about yourself at the end of the day, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. It's there's someone singing your praises.
And I've said it before, I'll say it again. You've done all the work. I'm just sharing a little bit about it. Now, Abe, your journey spans multiple types of sales roles, from cold calling patent lawyers to selling software and now leading Icebreaker Business Development. Given your experience doing the dirty work of the sales grind and your desire to pursue business for yourself, how did those factors ultimately lead you to transition from being a top salesperson to becoming a fractional VP of sales?
So yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot there. Like you said, I've been in sales for a little bit. I always tell people I've been in sales my entire career. My career is like 10 years. I'm still pretty young, but for me, that just feels like a really long time. You know, that's my third of my life. So I've been in sales for a while, various different sales roles. And I sort of came to a realization. Obviously, there was always this desire to build my own business. I've tried different things and different, side hustles. So I always had that there. But I sort of came to this realization that, especially, so maybe even just to move a step back, is I'm originally from New York. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I moved to Israel when I was about like 19. I came here for a year, went back to New York, came back here, got married. So I've sort of been here since I'm like 22 years old, consistently straight. And I worked a couple jobs before I got to Israel in New York. And, the jobs in New York obviously there's a lot of opportunity there. New York's a big city. There's, that's where people go when they want to make money. So obviously there it was a little bit different. Some of the positions were like really high potential, could make a lot of money. But I felt like once I came to Israel, like the opportunities were a little bit different. It was more what I was finding were there were a lot of positions where they'd offer like either like a nice base, but then you're capped at a certain amount where you can't make more than X amount of money. Or they'll be like, okay, if you really want to make it, if you really don't want to cap on how much you can make, like go commission only. And then it's like you're sitting, for 6 months before you make a penny, and it's a huge risk. So I said, I want to be able to make as much money as possible. Taking a commission only job, it's just seemed silly if I can just start my own business. I really did start as like, building out a fractional, or I mean, I guess not even a fractional, more of like an outsourced SDR agency, where I was like, okay, there's such a big need for people that want to grow their businesses. Obviously, they want new leads, they want more leads, want more meetings on their calendars. So I was like, let me see if I can get them SDRs overseas, whether that's South Africa, Dominican Republic, Panama. Experimented with a bunch of different of countries. And I quickly realized that it was attracting the wrong type of client, and it wasn't really what I wanted. And as I was going, really found this, which we'll talk about a little bit more obviously soon, is I sort of found this gap where so many businesses that are trying to get from founder sales to actually building out a sales team, we're just struggling so much. They cannot figure out how to find the right salespeople, how to actually put the systems into place to make sure that they're successful. And, that's when I started to really focus more on becoming like a fractional VP of sales, where I come in, help you find a salesperson, and actually help you build through that salesperson to create like a scalable in-house sales team. So I did like turn more into like a consultant as opposed to like an agency, if that makes sense. So that's like a little bit of in a nutshell, like sort of how I got here.
So 10 years in sales, right? A decade in a role or in a position that most people don't last very long in, especially when it comes to business development, sales development representative, cold calling. It's a high stress environment. It's driven by results, and it's tough. You face a lot of rejection. Right. From your perspective as as an expert salesperson and, with a wealth of experience in a position that many people fail in, what's fundamentally when it comes to sales, what's the most important aspect that people, or the most important skill people need to develop to become a competent salesperson?
I remember my first sales job, my sales manager, who was super intense, he told me, he goes, you know, only 1% of people that actually come into to do sales or try to create sales as their career, only 1% are actually successful. And I was like, whoa, like how am I going to do this? So to actually become that 1%, I think over the years what I've realized is that almost everything in sales is teachable except for that resilience, that hustle, that grit. Like you really have to be built, and you can work on it. You can build that as like a skill. There are most of the times it's like there's a certain type of person where they're just like, boom, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to like get through this. And I have a bad month, like I'm gonna continue to push. If I got rejected 3 times in a row, someone told me to go to go get a better job. I've had people, I call them like, get a real job. It's very hard and it's very tough. You got to really be able to stick it out. I think it can be a skill that's developed, but it's the kind of thing that you really have to work really hard to develop. Some people have it more naturally, where they're just like they just have. I think like you as a business owner probably know, like you have to have that as well. Like you got to really be able to like stick it out and push through and not just fold when it gets hard and when you feel like things are not going in the right direction.
Absolutely. So, you developed those skills. You had some innate desire and drive to develop that and become that top 1%. You realized that, hey, why cap my opportunity and my potential by working for someone else? You set out, you started an outsourced SDR agency. And then, you realize that maybe providing people with meetings and leads isn't really the way to help them properly in the way that they need. You identified that, business owners, they need more than that. They need a system, and you had systems, you could come in and implement them as well. What do you think through that journey? What was that eye-opening moment where you realized that, the way I'm doing things now isn't the way that I need to ultimately be operating to help my clients in the best way?
So that's a really good question. There was a certain point. I'm not sure if I can pinpoint the exact time, but there was a point where I just realized like The people that are coming to me are really small, new businesses who have not really even found so much traction. And they're sort of looking for quick wins. So they're like, what's the cheapest way that I can get leads and meetings on my calendar? As opposed to, someone who's ready to, has a nice revenue, has a nice, business that's working. They're really driving it, but in the end of the day, they found product market fit. They know where they need to go to grow, but they just can't really they haven't really figured out how to sort of build off of someone else, a team to do it besides for themselves. So I sort of started to realize, like, when I was working with these smaller companies, they were just looking for someone to come in and like hopefully like blow up their business, which is not really the way that it works. And then it's like a month in, and they're like, "Oh, I just spent the $3,000. Oh my gosh, I'm like freaking out." It didn't seem like a sustainable thing to me, and I realized when I started to like as I was going and as I was speaking to different prospects and different companies, some of the larger ones didn't even just want that. They really wanted more than that. They were asking me, well, can you get me someone that can actually like build out a full-on sales department like for my company? They weren't just like, oh, we just need meetings on the calendar. They really did need more. And then I started to think to myself, I was like, makes sense. The serious companies, serious businesses want real solutions. They don't just want quick fixes. They don't just want leads, which leads are nice, but if you don't have an engine to actually process those leads, it doesn't really do anything. So at that point, I was like, oh, I really have to like figure out like what to switch here. What's the move? Like, what do they need? What do they want?
So it was the listening to your clients, to your customers, and listening to their position and their needs, not trying to project what you think a good solution for them would be, but actually understanding what are the challenges they're up against right now and what are they really looking for? What do they need to move forwards? You identified that, yeah, that fractional VP of sales is really the role that you needed to step in to build out the systems, the true systems that your clients needed. So today at Icebreaker Business Development, you come in and you help your clients build out these scalable sales systems. Can you walk us through what that looks like, how you actually come in and help a client with this?
Yeah, for sure. So most of the times, the companies that are coming to me I'll try to like paint a picture of the kind of business that usually will come to me is you have a really great hustler man, businesswoman that started a company on their own, sold a lot, sold really impressive people, like really impressive people that you don't find these types of people all the time. What usually ends up happening to them is they'll build up their business to be doing, let's say, let's just throw a number, let's just say, $1 million in revenue. So, they take home their salary, they pay 2, 3 people in the back office, and they're running a nice business. There's things are moving. There's at a certain point, they're like, how do I actually scale this? So they realized, every year I have another extra 150K in the bank. So let me go out and find a salesperson to, go and scale. So they'll go out, they'll find a salesperson, someone who comes to them and says, I'm the guy, sold in your industry before. I know what it is. They're like super excited. They pay them this salary. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, like 6, 7, 8 months in, and they're like, so where's like, weren't you this expert in the industry that sold millions of dollars? Yeah, but the leads you gave me weren't good. And, but by the way, if this deal from my cousin comes through, will be all worth it. Really and then they were just like left picking up the pieces, and they're like, I just spent $1,000 in the last 8 months. Paid a $35,000 recruitment fee to pick this guy up. And they're like, where, what, who, how, why didn't this work? And a lot of the times, these companies will even do this multiple times, and they'll say, oh, you know what? It was probably just a mistake. I got the wrong person. Didn't work. Let me try it again. And they just end up realizing like it's not going to work, and it's just they get stuck. So they don't even really know. So it happens to be like when I meet these companies, they're almost like, wow, like this is exactly what I need, because really what they do need is they need someone that has done this before, which would probably be a VP of sales who's going to cost $200,000 plus bring on a salesperson who's going to be anywhere between, 60, 70, 80 as a base. And they can't necessarily like squeeze that. That already is a little bit much. So to bring me in as sort of like a fractional VP of sales makes it much more feasible. So now back to your question, I guess. So for these types of companies, what would it look like to actually work with them? A day to day or how I go about helping these companies is, so I come in, I do actual recruiting for them. So they come to me, they're like, we need a salesperson, we want to try this again. You seem like you have a better strategy to it than the way that we've done it. Great. So I go out, I do the recruiting, I find them a salesperson. We run a couple of rounds of interviews, and once we find the right person, bring them on, um, and great. Then that's when the real work starts. So sometimes companies need really like everything from A to Z. So it's even like building them out a CRM, actually creating the correct accountability structure with like KPIs and targets and things like that. Then most of the times it will involve actually identifying who their ICP is, because from the way that they've done business, a lot of times they know who their ICP is, but they don't necessarily, know what it is in terms of like giving it over to someone else. So actually putting that down on a piece of paper and really going out and testing it and seeing who's responsive to the product that they sell. So that can be another aspect. Actual like sales messaging and sales training, working with these reps to actually help them with sales pitch, overcoming objections. Really, like anything, like I always say, anything that a VP of sales would do is what I do, sort of on more of like a fractional basis, because you're bringing in one sales rep. You don't need a full-time VP of sales to actually work with them. So for them, it like makes so much more sense to bring me on and then work with them on that fractional basis, if that makes sense. I know that was like a pretty long answer, but I hope that gave like a little bit of a picture, sort of
Yeah,
how it
absolutely.
works.
So you come in and you're able to provide services at a lower cost that a full-time employee can, but perhaps with a little bit of waste, especially for smaller or growing businesses who have limited resources. Or you can't pour everything into one role, especially if you're looking to hire a salesperson. You don't have a developed process or system and everything else to support that. Hiring a salesperson isn't going to solve your problem, right? You need the system, you need the structure, and you need to know it's going to work. So the accountability there that you can provide, not just to the business owner, but to the actual salespeople that you bring in as well, can completely transform businesses. And this is what's really required, right? You can't just hire a salesperson and think that it's going to fix a solution, or go to an outside agency, get some leads, and think that, if you don't already have an established sales process, that everything's going to grow regardless. So it's definitely profound work that you do with your clients, completely changing the game for them.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if we shift gears here just a little bit, right now we're talking about sales, business development, client acquisition is what's behind it all. You yourself, you're a business development expert. Today, for coaches and consultants specifically, when it comes to client acquisition and business development, there's some pretty significant forces that everyone is up against. There is seemingly an unending number of coaches and consultants entering the market, competing for everyone's time and attention. There's AI coming to the mix as well, creating a ton of content or sending out a bunch of emails and messages that are adding to the noise and to the confusion. From your position in Icebreaker Business Development, with the depth of sales skills and knowledge that you have, these forces, although perhaps less significant than for other consultants, are still affecting you today as well. From your position, again, as an expert in business development, what are you observing from within when it comes to the challenges present in today's market for client acquisition? It's harder to stand out. There's a bunch of noise. There's more competitors than ever. It's harder to get people's attention. People are guarding their time more closely than ever, business owners and executives and leaders. What is it that you're seeing as the biggest challenges for client acquisition from a coaching and a consulting perspective in today's environment?
So it's a really good question. I think in terms of challenges, I can say for myself, like really the hardest part of getting new clients and really like building the business through finding new people is really like that sort of like the time that I'm actually working with my clients to the time that I need to actually reach out and actually do sales. Because if it was up to me, like I would love to just be focusing on bringing in new clients all the time. Like that's what I enjoy doing. As much as, like setting up the systems and working with the companies is also enjoyable. But if it was up to me, I would love to really be like focusing on actual like client acquisition all the time. Like, that's my thing. I want to flip it a little bit because I think it's challenging, but I also think that it's in a way not so challenging. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is I actually saw a great post, I think it was today or yesterday on LinkedIn. Someone said they put out their phone number on LinkedIn, saying, I don't remember if it was exactly like saying pitch me or it was regarding something else. And the person said that they basically got bombarded through LinkedIn messages when they put out their phone number. And he said he got 2 text messages as opposed to a bunch of maybe tens and tens of LinkedIn messages and 2 text messages and not one phone call. So I think that, yes, you're right. There is a lot more people to compete with, and there's so many people trying to get their attention, but people are also getting like lazy in a way where they're trying to find the easiest way out, the easiest way to do it with all the automations and all these things, and people aren't even picking up the phones anymore. People always ask me like, cold calling is cold calling dead? Cold calling is so hard. Yeah, it's super hard. People don't want to answer the phone anymore because there's so much spam. There's caller detection these days. If you really stand out, if someone answers the phone and you sound like they're getting calls all day that are like obviously annoying sales calls, and then all of a sudden you sound like someone who's really an expert in their field, someone who really comes across as like different than everyone else, and then all of a sudden they're like, whoa, that's different. So like, yes, you're right. It's very hard to stand out. But I also do think that if you're willing to put in the work, most people aren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think this is one of the most important things for the audience right here, right? And this is what I wanted to get to is that despite the challenges that everyone is facing, or let's say, they are challenges, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of messages, there's a ton of content being created. It seems like it's harder to stand out than ever. But if you focus on what's important, what people want, right? Genuine connections, thoughtful interactions, right? Showing people that you're not just a bot, you're not just a robot trying to spam them, but you actually want to connect with them for value, right? To try and provide something, but first and foremost, to understand the position they're in, to understand if you can't even provide anything valuable to them, right? You need to differentiate yourself. You need to be more human, especially in such an AI and a tech-driven world.
For sure. I know like we don't have tons of time, but just to quickly like add on to that because I have a great example is I was working with a sales rep like just before this call, and she was sort of like, talking to me about, I'm going to a show next week. Like, how do I go about, like, I want to make sure I'm fully, making sure I'm maximizing this event to make sure I make as many connections, to get sales. And I was like, you have to realize, like, people are coming into this show and all they're gonna get is sold to. If you come to them and you be the person that genuinely takes an interest in what they do and who they are, and just want to make a connection, like, hey, let's exchange the details, we should go out for a coffee sometime. People all of a sudden are like, wow, she's different. Like, she's not like the person that's just like the other 14 people that just bombarded me telling me about their amazing features of their products and how great they are and how much they could save me on their car insurance. So it's just a great example of how like it's tough, but it's also easy if you think about it.
And the more and the longer that people rely on technology and tools entirely to try and make those initial connections with automations or whatever the heck else they're using, the more they're going to lose the skill, right, of being able to communicate and interact properly at the level they need to. So the more people that focus on that, I think the more trust there is for the people who focus on the human as well. Let everybody continue going in one direction, stay steadfast in the direction works, and time will out, we could say. So when looking at this and, making the transition to AI, you're in a position right now where you don't have a ton of time for yourself, right? You're serving clients, you're split between making sales and business development and actually working with clients as well. Where does AI start to come in for you to save you time and provide you with extra leverage?
So I don't consider myself like an AI expert, but I definitely use AI a lot, and it's something sort of that has really become like a huge part of what I do. Some of the main things that I use it for um, are really to like help automate some tasks and back end work, like things that would take me, 30 minutes or 40 minutes to do can now take me 5 minutes. For example, I get off a sales call. I want to create a custom proposal. I have my note taker in the meeting, which is automatically synced to my chat GPT, which automatically syncs to my proposal generator. And boom, like instead of me having to go into even forget about going to the meeting, just take notes during the meeting, go back, what did we talk about? What points do I want to focus on the proposal? Like all that stuff is fully done for me. I can, with a click of a couple buttons. So like for those types of tasks, it's been genuinely like unbelievable. Other things that I use it for, like graphics, I want to put a picture with a LinkedIn post. I use uh, I use AI to generate pictures. Those types of things I've just found it to be like, it's game changing. And I'm sure there's so many things that I can learn myself that I'm not using AI for that potentially can start to use. And, I'm always open to learning, always open to finding out new things. I would say the one thing that I'm a little skeptical about with AI is the fact of when people try to use it to replace humans, which maybe it's going to get there at some point. We don't know. It can, but right now where we're at, it's just not there. And I'm seeing people trying to sell, AI SDRs and AI BDRs. And, I've tested these out. I've tested multiple of them out. And it's not there because, and if it was there, what would happen is every single company would be using them every single minute. And then what would happen is we would all be bombarded from every single company because they're all using unlimited AI agents to just reach out to all of us. And it's just
People will start seeking human interaction again. You can't replace
exactly.
human interaction. I have a hard time seeing a world where an AI, even, an AI humanoid will be able to elicit the same type of emotion and connection that humans feel between themselves. With these things in mind, when it comes to the sales process, from your perspective, what are the biggest advantages and then the disadvantages as well of integrating AI into the sales cycle?
So the disadvantages are that people get a little bit too reliant on them. I think like what we're saying even just before is just like, I don't want to do outreach because it's too difficult. Now I can just hire an AI SDR and then, hopefully it'll bring me leads, which we haven't seen that work. So people get very reliant on it. And then, like you said, they lose the skill, they lose the creativity, they lose the genuine connection. That's a big challenge that I think we have to really be, I guess, like just be aware of and make sure we're not we still are human. Like, we want to get on a podcast. I could have sent an AI agent to do this podcast. What does that like do for us? That doesn't really help us. With the positives though, it really saves you so much time on certain like, just repetitive, tedious tasks. Like that's the biggest thing that I would say we want to get out of it.
Very thoughtful. Your story covers the sales grind, calculated risk, and the strategic importance of systematized growth. For the founders, coaches, and growth minded listeners who are struggling to hire their first salesperson or build a reliable pipeline, what's the single most important piece of advice that you'd leave them with about calculated risk, building systems, and achieving predictable revenue?
If I had to pick one thing that's so, so tough because I feel like I guess what the piece of advice that I would give is that there is no single answer, is that it's always different. It always requires understanding. Am I hiring the right person? Are we, experimenting to figure out what works for them and what doesn't work to make sure that they're successful? I'm not sure I can even think of like a real specific one, answer of like this is the most important thing when it comes to, trying to build out your sales team. I guess maybe if I had to give one thing, I would say, look at it as sort of like a long-term investment. You want to make sure you're in a good stock. Obviously, you're investing in a good stock and or a good fund, but you also don't want to pull out just because you saw like a little dip. You want to, I'm in this for the long run. I see this as a stock that's going to do well, and just continue to experiment and look for ways to improve and look for ways to get better. And yeah, I guess that would be, maybe my top piece of advice if I had to give one.
Excellent. Abe, thank you for joining us on the Growth Shift today. For any of our listeners who might like to learn more about what you're doing with Icebreaker Solutions, or who maybe are looking for a fractional VP of sales themselves, what would be the best way to find you?
So my LinkedIn is probably the easiest way. Get on there. You could either book a call, you could send me a message. I'm very, very responsive there.
Excellent. Abe, thanks again for joining us on the Growth Shift.
David, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Another powerful conversation on the Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on the Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.